Today is the 6th day of this November 83 7-day retreat. And we will read from the dialogues of Zen Master Hui Hai. The book is called The Zen Teaching of Hui Hai, translated by John Blofeld. Zen Teaching of Hui Hai on sudden illumination. The Japanese name of Hui Hai is Hyakujo, and his disciple and successor was Wang Po, of whom we will probably read tomorrow. Some of the language is unfamiliar. We'll try to comment on that so maybe it becomes familiar. For the word dharma, which is a Sanskrit word referring either directly to the teaching of the Buddha or to phenomena in general or to truth or to the law of the universe, we're using here not dharma but truth. And whenever Hui Hai or the translator John Blofeld talks about love, I've substituted the word attraction because it is in this sense that the word love in this book is used. We'll just read several of the different question and answer excerpts. Sometimes words or sentences have been eliminated, which make the listening cumbersome. Here a questioner asks, what does right perception mean? In the preceding dialogue there was talk about right perception, that there must be right perception. And here the questioner says, what is right perception? What does it mean? And Hui Hai answers, it means perceiving that there is nothing to perceive. What does that mean? Asks the questioner, perceiving that there is nothing to perceive. And the answer is, it means beholding all sorts of forms and sounds, but without being stained by them, as no thoughts of clinging or aversion arise in the mind. Beholding all thoughts, beholding all forms and sounds without being stained by them. The stain is not meant in any moral sense. It means without immediately interpreting them, wanting to keep them, or wanting to get rid of them. Beholding all sorts of forms, but without being stained by them, as no thoughts of clinging or aversion arise in the mind. Of course, these thoughts do arise in the mind. Can they be beheld, perceived, without clinging or rejection? Not, I must have no thoughts of clinging. Thought comes up quicker than one's intention not to have it. At what point can there be a clear perception without judgment, without clinging or pushing away? Reaching this state is called obtaining the Buddha eye, which really means just that and nothing else. A very simple statement. Buddha is a Sanskrit word for awake. Reaching this state is called obtaining the Buddha eye, which really means just that and nothing else. Whereas if the spectacle of various forms produces attraction or aversion in you, that is called perceiving them as though they had an objective existence, which implies having the eye of an ordinary person. For indeed, ordinary people have no other sort of eye. It is the same with all the other organs of perception. What Wihai seems to be setting up here is a discrimination between ordinary people and people with the Buddha eye, which is very dangerous. But in a later point, he himself warns about this. It's not one either has the one or the other, but perceiving without judging is one way. Perceiving and immediately judging, clinging, or rejecting is another way. The previous dialogue was about a state of purity, and here comes a question about it. Purity, again, not in any moral sense. Morality is relative to the society in which moral standards are established, and morality in one society or group or tribe or nation is not the same morality as perceived or conceived of in another one. The questioner says, when the mind rests in a state of purity, will that not give rise to some attachment to purity? State of purity here meaning this state in which there is no attraction and no aversion, no grasping and no rejecting. A state of pure perception. And here the questioner says, when this state prevails, will that not give rise to some attachment to this state of purity? And Huihai answers, if on reaching the state of purity, you refrain from thinking, now my mind is resting in purity, there will be no such attachment. So, if there's an instant of a pure perception and then the thought, now I've got this pure perception, that's the end of pure perception and the beginning of thinking. In terms of me, what I have and what I am, a new image, pride, and all that comes from that. Division, discrimination between people. I have it, but you don't. I'm better than you are. Or I'm worse than you are, who seem to have this purity of perception. Because you sort of give hints that you have it. So Huihai says, if you refrain from thinking, now my mind is resting in purity, there will be no such attachment. The questioner says, when the mind rests in a state of void, will that not entail some attachment to void? Void means there is nothing. There are such times, states when there's nothing. Nothing that the mind fabricates about something. Because unless one is in a state of hypnosis, listen, what is there? That's there. But it is no thing unless you start explaining it, labeling it, visualizing it, then it becomes something. Without that, it's just what it is. What is it? So a state of void is where there is no labeler, no explainer, no grasper or rejecter. Just a state of pure perception in which seeing or listening are not two different sense activities anymore. It's not. It's as one. The senses operating as one, namely undivided by explanation or words, categories. That's what referred to as a state of void. Not a vacuum in which there's nothing. That's an imagination. So the questioner says, when the mind rests in a state of void, will that not entail some attachment to void? And Huihai answers, if you think of your mind as resting in a state of void, then there is such an attachment. And the questioner comes back, when the mind reaches the state of not dwelling upon anything, and continues in that state, will there not be some attachment to its not dwelling upon anything? One wonders if the questioner really is in these states, or just thinking about them and wondering whether he'll be attached if he gets there, which can be sort of a subtle resistance to the whole thing. What's the use of my getting there if I'm going to be attached to it? I may be wrong, but or else he really is questioning this thing in himself. But if he was really questioning and looking, then it's so clear. The moment one says, I am in this state, that's the end of the state. Huihai says, so long as your mind is fixed solely on the void, there's nothing to which you can, solely fixed on void, there's nothing to which you can attach yourself. If you want to understand the non-dwelling mind very clearly, while you're actually sitting in meditation, you must be cognizant only of the mind and not permit yourself to make judgments. That is, avoid evaluations in terms of good, evil, or anything else. Whatever is past, so do not sit in judgment upon it. For when minding about the past ceases of itself, it can be said that there's no longer any past. When minding about the past ceases of itself, not repressed, but it ceases, because it's understood that it's just memory, thoughts. And there's attention in which it may cease of itself, this constant stream of memories. Then Huihai says, then it can be said there's no longer any past. And you can test this out for yourself, whether the past exists if you don't think about it. Thinking creates it, as well as the future. The thinking process itself is past, present, and future. Whatever is in the future is not here yet, so do not direct your hopes and longings toward it. For when minding about the future ceases of itself, it can be said it can be said that there is no future. Whatever is present is now at hand. Just be conscious of your non-attachment to everything. Non-attachment in the sense of not allowing any attraction or aversion for anything to enter your mind. For when minding the present ceases of itself, we may say there is no present. In listening, drip, drip, drip. No need to say this is happening in the present, is there? It's a commentary. It has nothing to do with what's going on. He goes on, should your mind wander away, do not follow it. Good advice. What we usually say is not to get wrapped up in the content of the thoughts. Well, when you're wrapped up in it, you're wrapped up in it. That's all there is to it. But there's more to the wandering or thinking mind than the very content of it. Of the thoughts. There's the whole process itself, which can be felt, and at that moment there is no embroilment in the content. There's awareness of the process going on, and with the awareness the process already changes, is interrupted, or may give way to awareness of breathing, or questioning who or mu, or what is it? Should your mind wander away, do not follow it, whereupon your wandering mind will stop wandering of its own accord. Should your mind desire to linger somewhere, do not follow it and do not dwell there, whereupon your mind's questing for a dwelling place will cease of its own accord. Thereby you will come to possess a non-dwelling mind, a mind which remains in a state of non-dwelling. If one makes all this an axiom and says this is what has to happen, then one is in for frustration. Just to listen to it is enough. Not this should happen to me or this has happened to me, but to listen and to look right now. Not what should happen in the future or what has not or has happened in the past. Just to listen to these words in simplicity, if it's possible. This full awareness in yourself of a mind dwelling upon nothing is known as having a clear perception of your own mind. Let me read this again. This full awareness in yourself of a mind dwelling upon nothing is known as having a clear perception of your own mind, or, in other words, a clear perception of your own nature. A mind which dwells upon nothing is the Buddha mind, or the uncreate mind. Now he's giving names to it, which of course in the Buddhist tradition would be Buddha mind. In another tradition it would be given a different name. Unless Buddha is just used as an awakened mind, which very often this word is used in that sense. Or the uncreate is often used. An uncreate mind means not created by thought, and not creating thought at that instant of awareness. not created by anything. Which particularly for a Westerner who is so steeped in the conditioning of creation is a hard concept to grasp, something that is uncreated. Because God, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, is uncreated, but He's the creator of everything else. So how can a mind be uncreate? You can't think about it, because then you're creating thoughts about it. Not knowing, the mind that doesn't know is the uncreate mind. Not a mind that's just stumped temporarily. Because then it's just stumped for a thought, but the wheels are turning, the scanning is going on for something that is known about the situation, that reminds one of the situation so one can deal with it. What one then really deals with it is a memory that one has produced from the brain. And the newness of the situation is lost because one now reacts to the memory of a similar or seemingly similar situation or person. And this is the essence of our out of touchness with reality. Always living in the create and not allowing the uncreate mind to function. He says here, if you have not realized it yet, you must strive and strive. We don't say here strive and strive. Striving has such associations. I don't have to go into them. We all know them. But question and question. Look, listen, attend. Not because somebody stands over you with a whip or has told you must do this, or because there's the lure of a reward, but because one has no choice but question what truth really is. Caught up in all these mind creations. Memories. Just read you his way of putting it, which I'm not endorsing. I want to say this is not read as to bring in some authority. It's just read to give you a break from hearing 6 or 5 talks in similar words, to maybe bring in some fresh words or something that may not fall into a groove. It's not that Hui Hai or any scripture is an authority. The only sense is that one sees in oneself what is true, and whether there is such a thing as wholeness and no division. And love, which is not just attraction, possession, with jealousy waiting in the wings. Then says Huihai, if you have not realized it yet, you must strive and strive, you must increase your exertions. Then when your efforts are crowned with success, because we don't know what the Chinese said. Mr. Blofeld is in this too. He says in the foreword that he has sometimes used a little liberty of making it a little bit more understandable. When your efforts are crowned with success, you will have attained to understanding from within yourself. That's the important thing, to understand from within oneself. Not finally have Huihai's or Wang Po's or the Buddha's words down pat, so they come upon demand. Understanding from within yourself, and understanding stemming from a mind that abides nowhere, by which we mean a mind free from delusion and reality alike. A mind disturbed by attraction and aversion is deluded. A mind free from both of them is real. And a mind thus freed reaches a state in which opposites are void, whereby freedom and deliverance are attained. This freedom from the opposites, one discovers a state within oneself, a state of hatred, and immediately thinking, I must love, because this is what is the right thing to do. Which means the hate is not understood, is not seen and touched and understood. Instead, what is projected is the opposite of love, which isn't understood either. When hatred is understood and melts away, then what is there? To postulate that then there is love, it can't be done. Is it there? Not meaning, as we said, possessiveness for one person or a few. Can't be described. It can only be said what it is not. Here is an interview which took place between Huihai and his teacher, Baso, apparently when they first met. The Chinese name of Baso is Matsu. When the master, meaning Huihai, first arrived to pay his respects to Matsu, the latter inquired, "From where have you come?" From the great cloud monastery, at Wei Chao, answered the master. "What do you hope to gain by coming here?" "I've come to seek the Buddha Dharma," meaning truth. To this Matsu replied, "Instead of looking to the treasure house which is your very own, you've left home and gone wandering far away. What for? I've absolutely nothing here at all. What is this Buddha Dharma that you seek?" Whereat the master prostrated himself and inquired, "Please tell me to what you alluded when you spoke of a treasure house of my very own." And Matsu said, "That which asks the question is your treasure house." It contains absolutely everything you need and lacks nothing at all. It is there for you to use freely, so why this vain search for something outside of yourself? No sooner were these words spoken than the Master received a great illumination and recognized his own mind. Recognized is not a good translation. It means I've already known it, now I recognize it. Seeing it or perceiving it without recognition, that's the point. What you recognize is already in the repertoire. A Vinaya master. Vinaya is a Buddhist sect which dwells upon rules and regulations, discipline, thinking that by observing, I don't know, the 700 or how many rules and regulations, there may be something happening. A Vinaya master named Yuan once came and asked, "Do you make efforts in your practice of the way, Master? Do you make efforts in your practice of the way, Master?" And Hui Hai said, "Yes, I do." "How?" And Hui Hai answered, "When hungry, I eat. When tired, I sleep." The questioner says, "And does everybody make the same efforts as you do, Master?" And Hui Hai said, "Not in the same way." And the questioner said, "Why not?" And Hui Hai says, when they are eating, they think of 100 kinds of necessities. And when they're going to sleep, they ponder over affairs of 1,000 different kinds. That is how they differ from me. At this, the Vinaya master was silenced. And here it says, the Venerable Yun Kuang once asked, "Master, do you know where you will be reborn?" And Hui Hai says, "We haven't died yet, so what's the use of discussing our rebirths?" Once the Master took his place in the assembly hall and said, "It is far better for all of you to be unconcerned men." Take it, in this day and age, men and women, although there were women practices all along there, but I guess they were kept separated. I'm not so informed about this. Why all this craze for karmic activities that will put felons' kangs about your necks and send you down to hell? Toiling and moiling the whole day through, telling people you're practicing Zen and studying the way, holding forth about your understanding of the Buddha Dharma, this sort of thing is no use at all. It simply amounts to rushing about in the pursuit of sounds and forms. Ah, when will you desist from it all? Once this poor monk heard the great master Matsu say, "Your own treasure house contains absolutely everything you need. Use it freely instead of searching vainly for something outside of yourself." From that day forward, I desisted. Making use of your own treasure house according to your needs, that can be called happiness. There's no single thing which can be grasped or rejected. When you cease looking on things in their temporal aspect, as having come or gone, and as having come or gone, then in the whole universe, above, below, and round about, there will be no grain of anything which is not your own treasure. All you have to do is carefully contemplate your own minds. Then the marvelous one substance will constantly manifest itself. Or, if of this there is no shadow of doubt, do not search for the truth with your intellects, do not search at all. The nature of the mind is intrinsically pure. It is through your own bodies that reality is perceived. If you do not follow sounds and sights so that they stir your mind, meaning again the attraction or rejection, or getting infatuated with it, or stimulated by it, or put into a state of ecstasy over it. Here in a monastery, the sounds and sights could very well refer to the sounds and sights practiced and emanating from monasteries. I don't know if that at that time there was chanting, Buddha figures. There probably were. Rituals, ceremonies, all the stuff that gives one such a good feeling, a feeling of meaning, a feeling of togetherness, a feeling of the sacred. But let's watch one's mind, what this all is. If you do not follow sounds and sights so that they stir your minds, and if you do not pursue appearances so that they give rise to discriminations, you will then be unconcerned men. Don't stand there for so long. Take good care of yourselves. Unconcerned here, not to be misunderstood as somebody who doesn't give a darn about anything, but not constantly being stirred with reaction, with habitual reaction by everything that occurs, is said to one, or expected of one. The Venerable Tao Kuang, who was an adherent of the Dharma Lakasana school, and also a commentator upon the scriptures, inquired, "Master, what mental processes do you employ in pursuing the way?" And Huihai said, "I have no mental processes that would be of use, and I have no way to follow." The questioner says, if both those statements are true, why is it that every day you convene gatherings during which you urge others to learn and follow the way by the means of Zen? Chan, it is called here. And Huihai says, this old monk does not possess even a dot of ground in which to stick an awl. So how can he gather people? He does not have so much as a tongue, then how can he urge people to do anything? And the man says, "Why, Master, you're lying to my face." And Huihai says, how can this old monk, being without a tongue, to urge people, tell a lie? The man says, really, I don't understand the way the Venerable Chan Master talks. And Huihai says, nor does this old monk understand himself. Somebody once asked, how much time do we need to attain deliverance by setting our minds on practicing the Dharma? And Huihai says, using the mind for practices is like washing dirty things in sticky mud. Prajna is the Buddhist word for wisdom. Prajna is mysterious and wonderful. itself unbegotten, meaning uncreate, its mighty functioning is at our service regardless of times and seasons. The questioner says, can ordinary people succeed in mastering those functions? And Hui Hai says those who have perceived their own nature are no longer ordinary people. The supreme vehicle of sudden illumination transcends ordinary and holy alike. While deluded people are talking of ordinary and holy, illumined people leap over samsara and nirvana, meaning deluded and illumined. Samsara means the ordinary world. Nirvana is the world beyond the ordinary world. And he says here, illumined people leap over both of them. While deluded, people are speaking of facts and of the underlying principle. Illumined men exercise their function without restriction. I don't want to say so much about illumined people and ordinary people. Here somebody asks, you Zen masters always say that if we awaken to the way right in front of us, we shall attain deliverance in our present bodily form. But you're wrong. Now what does he say? You Zen masters always say that if we awaken to the way right in front of us, we shall attain deliverance in our present bodily form. You're wrong. And Hui Hai says, suppose a man, after a lifetime of virtuous conduct, suddenly puts forth his hand and steals something. Is that person a thief in his present bodily form? And the man says, obviously yes. And Hui Hai says, then if at this moment somebody suddenly perceives his own nature, tell me, why can he not be delivered? And the man says, at this moment, impossible. According to the sutras, 3 eons of uncountable extent must pass before we can attain to it. And Hui Hai says, can eons of uncountable extent be counted? At this, Yuan shouted indignantly, can someone who draws an analogy between thievery and liberation claim that he reasons correctly? And Hui Hai says, Acharya, which means venerable teacher, must have been a teacher he was talking to. Venerable teacher, you do not understand the way, but you should not prevent others from understanding it. Your own eyes are shut, so you get angry when someone else sees. Red in the face, Yuan began striding away, but called over his shoulder, who's an old muddlehead right off the way? And Hui Hai said, that which is striding away is just your way. A monk inquired about the meaning of prajna. Prajna, the Sanskrit word for wisdom, clarity, the clarity that acts right action. A monk inquired about the meaning of prajna. And Hui Hai says, if you suppose that anything is not prajna, let me hear what it is. And the man says, how may we perceive our own nature? And Hui Hai says, that which perceives is your own nature. Without it, there could be no perception. Questioner says, then what is self-cultivation? And Hui Hai says, refraining from deceiving yourself is self-cultivation. Because to refrain from deceiving oneself, one must see self-deception, or else it goes unnoticed. And one can tell oneself, I'm refraining from this as well as all kind of other things, but there has to be a seeing of self-deception if there is any. One cannot assume there is none. Cannot assume anything, one must look. So he says, refraining from deceiving yourself is self-cultivation. When your own nature's mighty function manifests itself, this is called the unequaled realm of truth. And the questioner says, does our own nature include evil? Does our own nature include evil? And Hui Hai says, it does not even include good. Meaning, beware of these opposites, which contain each other. The questioner says, if it contains neither good nor evil, where should we direct it when using it? Hui Hai says, to set your mind on using it is a great error. Because who is the user? That's the one imbued with good and evil, right and wrong, success and failure, achievement, success, yeah. Where should we direct when using it? And he says to set your mind on using it is a great error. Then what should we do to be right? And Hui Hai says there is nothing to do and nothing which can be called right. Which means everything is what it is. What is it? And out of right seeing or clear seeing comes an action which does not harm others, needs no moral standards. Once somebody inquired, suppose a man is sitting in a boat and the boat keel cuts to death a shellfish. Is the man guilty, or should the boat be blamed? I think it's just a glib question, because there's such concern with fear of killing, stepping on any small animal among certain Buddhist monks, certain sects, or maybe, I don't know which ones, but I know where we hold retreat in Germany, it's a building which is owned by the Buddhist Society, and there are 2 resident monks, and the lady who was running the place, and she was chafing under overwork, she was a little bit complaining about these 2 monks not working, because she had huge grounds there and garden, and we asked, well, why don't they? Well, they're not allowed to work in the garden because they may kill an ant or by putting the spade into the ground. Now both of them have shed their robes and they're both working in the garden. So here, somebody inquired, suppose a man is sitting in a boat and the boat keel cuts to death a fish. Is the man guilty, or should the boat be blamed? And Hui Hai says, man and boat had no mind to kill the shellfish, and the only person to be blamed is you. When a tearing wind snaps off a branch which falls and kills somebody, there is no murderer and no murdered. In all the world, there is no place where living beings do not suffer. Suffering here meaning get hurt in some way or another, earthquake, a falling branch, death, sickness. But what is suffering? One doesn't want to just assume this is inevitable. I want to know, what is suffering? And who is the sufferer? And what are all the ingredients of suffering? Apart from the pain that is inflicted or that is occurring in sickness. And if one looks, there is a great ingredient of self-pity in this suffering, of not wanting this pain or this sickness, of bracing against it, which causes more pain and more tension, of comparing oneself with people who are healthy and the envy that may arise out of that. If all of that is seen and therefore evaporates, then is there suffering, or is there just whatever is, as it is, felt as it is, not denied, not suppressed, felt as it is, with no extra? A monk once inquired, "Why do you forbid people to intone the sutras?" Sutras are the written words of the Buddha, and chants are the intonement of sutras, usually short sutras. A monk once asked, "Why do you forbid people to intone the sutras and liken intoning them to speaking in a foreign language?" And Huihai says, "Because such people are like parrots mimicking human speech without understanding its meaning. The sutras transmit the Buddha's meaning, and those who intone them without understanding that meaning are merely imitating someone else's words. That is why I do not allow it." Questioner says, "Can there be any meaning apart from writings, words, and speech?" It's a real honest, straightforward question. What other meaning is there than the words that I hear and recite and chant? Can there be any other meaning apart from the writings, words, and speech? And Huihai says, "Your talking like that reveals that you're just an imitator of other people's words." Very harsh, but straightforward. And then the questioner says, "We too are now using words. Why are you so dead set against their use?" And Huihai says, "Now listen attentively. Sutras are writings set forth in specific order. When I speak, I use meaningful words which are not writings. When most living beings speak, they employ words from writings, but they're not meaningful. To comprehend real meanings, we should go beyond unsteady words. To awaken to the fundamental truth, we should leap beyond words or writings. The truth is beyond words, speech, and writings. How can it be sought amid a plethora of sentences?" And here somebody asks, the Diamond Sutra, which is a Buddhist scripture, a very famous one, very much used in Zen monasteries, chanted in some monasteries. The Diamond Sutra speaks of leading sentient beings into the state of final nirvana. Leading all sentient beings into the state of final nirvana. It also says there are really no sentient beings to be led across. How can these two passages be reconciled? It first says and then repeats that sentient beings really are led across, but without being attached to their forms. I've often doubted this and I'm still not convinced, so I beg you, Master, to explain it to me. And I'll leave something out. And later on, Hui Hai says, when awakened, we're Buddhas. When deluded, we're sentient beings. To a bodhisattva, which means someone on the way, someone doing this work, every thought arising in the mind is a living being. We used to read a lot from the Sixth Patriarch, and he's always talking about this when talking about this vow, this great vow of delivering all sentient beings, which is vowed by every Buddhist or by many Buddhists. I vow to deliver all sentient beings or to liberate them. And people asked him about this. He said, these sentient beings are what goes on in our own mind. Can that be delivered, emptied out, seen through so it doesn't rule us? I'm using my own words. And here Hui Hai says, every thought arising in the mind is a living being. If every thought is looked into clearly, the substance of the mind is found to be void. And this is called the deliverance of living beings. The illuminated person liberates his inner living beings before they take shape in his own self. And since their shapes therefore do not exist, it is clear that there are in reality no living beings to be liberated. This not thinking about how can I deliver the other deluded people out there, but what goes on in my own mind, and as a thought comes up, can that be seen? And can one be delivered from its impact, its power, its mechanicalness? And this is how he interprets this delivering of all beings. When the mind is clear from such mechanicalness and unaware conditioning, then it can do no harm to anyone. But this is not a thing that happens once and for all. It is a process that goes on from moment to moment as thoughts arise in the mind. When no thought arises, then that's that. Then is there a thought, hey, I've got no thought. Can that be seen? And disappear the instant it's seen, that the seeing and the disappearance is simultaneous. May not be simultaneous. The thought may persevere and give birth to more thoughts and more thoughts. Then I want to know why. What is this? What's going on? Why am I so glued to these thoughts? As several people who have come to meeting have said, I've seen more clearly than ever the pleasure, the incredible pleasure I get out of these thoughts. And filling the time with them. And when there's afraid of this openness which touches the real thing, reality. Because one doesn't know it. So what is fear? What is more? Who am I? What is it? Or just questioning, not knowing? Attending, not knowing? We'll stop here for today.